Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's May 30th, 2020. We're here at the Fun With Aviation Museum. I'm Jim Hodgson, and I've got David Ozee with me today. Gary's not here today because we're going to talk about an airplane that's near and dear to David's heart. We're going to talk about the T-28 Trojan. So let's see, that was the wrong thing. No, I can't see the camera to turn it around. Ah, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. More operator error here this morning. Okay, this is a North American T-28 Trojan, and before we actually get into talking about this one a lot, hi Mike, glad to see you. We're going to talk about Mexican Air Force Squadron 201, and we're going to do that because this T-28 Trojan came from Squadron 201. I'm going to let David tell you about that in a minute. But first, why is that important to us? Well, as it turned out during the Second World War, before Mexico entered the war as part of the Allies, they were neutral until Germany sank a couple of their oil tankers in the Gulf of Mexico, which at that point in time they decided to become allies. So the Mexican Air Force initially was doing anti-submarine warfare types of things in the Gulf of Mexico, but then they decided that they needed to do more than that, and so they came up here to train. So the first squadron that came up here to Greenville and started to train up here, and they trained under the Wasps a little bit. In fact, they had a lot of surprises when they came up here, and one of them was that the Wasps are some of their instructors. Mostly the Wasps towed targets for them, but they were very surprised to have female instructors, but they said it was okay because they were very pretty. But they did their initial training up here, and they were designated as Squadron 201 here in the United States, and they became known as the Aztec Eagles. After they left here, they went to San Diego and they learned to fly the P-47s, and then they went from here and they went to the Philippines and went into combat in the Philippines. So that is the genesis, or why we are interested in Squadron 201 here. Well, when David came to us a few years ago with this airplane, we asked him about the lineage of it, and David told us that this airplane had come from Squadron 201, an Aztec Eagle. So David, tell us about this T-28.
Well, this particular example, it's an early A model. It's the initial T-28 A model. For the United States Air Force. This model is not operated by the Navy, which is the more common one you see today. It had the R1300 engine, only 900 horsepower compared to the later Navy versions, which had over 1400 horsepower. Two-bladed propeller versus the three-bladed propeller. But this, getting back to this being an Air Force, and I should point out that it's a late A model. So when this restoration is completed, you'll see a later style canopy. So the earlier A's had a taller canopy to clear the rollover structure, being a trainer. And you talked about that with the BT-13 last time. It has the rollover structure, being a trainer. So anyway, it was deleted on later models like this one. But this particular example, I don't have the very early history in it. 1956 through 57, it served in Arizona and also in Georgia, had some training squadrons. But in 1958, it was declared surplus, and it was actually transferred to the Mexican Air Force, and it went straight to, as you mentioned, Squadron 201 down in Cancun. Upon its delivery, it actually flew with, I should point out, 12 of them were delivered. This is in the initial batch of 12, and it's T-28 number 928 with the Mexican Air Force. It flew for the inaugural parade of the new president, Miguel Fuentes, and was barely in service before, in December of 1958, the Guatemalan Air Force sent two of their P-51 Mustangs out to a disputed fishing area that was in a dispute between Guatemala and Mexico, and strafed a bunch of fishing boats. They killed, let's look at my notes, they killed 3 fishermen and injured 14. So this started, they call it the crisis, the Guatemalan crisis in Mexico. So the, a little bit of vehicle traffic here.
Yep.
Hopefully you can hear me. The Mexicans put together a strike force after that to go down and eliminate the P-51 threat in Guatemala. There was a P-51 base in Aurora, Guatemala, We might let this truck get by first.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So this first batch of 12 were all armed. All of them had 50 caliber machine guns, one on each wing and a pod. And some were armed with rockets, some were armed with bombs as well. As you'll mention here later about the Mexican Air Force P-51s, so they still had 3 in service at this time. I'm sorry, P-47s. 3 P-47s in service at this time. So the 12 T-28s, some T-6s, a few AT-11s they used as bombers, and the 3 remaining Squadron 201 P-47s, along with a C-47 command ship, headed off to Guatemala to hopefully destroy the P-51s on the ground. They got within sight of the base, and the mission was scrubbed. They returned to Mexico, and this T-28 and the other 11 spent the remaining time of the crisis doing mock combat runs on the Guatemalan troops on the border and just basically patrolling the Mexican-Guatemalan border.
So it almost has a combat history.
Almost. So close.
Something interesting about the T-28s, and let's go back to where they got started, was the airplane was originally designed in 1949. And if you'll remember from our earlier walk-arounds of the T-33, it was designed at about the same time. So this was a airplane that was designed based on the World War II fighters as a piston airplane, and the T-33, of course, was the first really operational jet. So it's just interesting to me that you can see where the two airplanes kind of come together. Big straight wing airplanes, but one's a jet, and one is a big piston airplane. Now, these airplanes, besides the Air Force, there were a couple of other models, the T-28B and the T-28C, which the Navy and the Marine Corps used.
Absolutely.
The C model was especially designed for carrier work. I know when I went through flight school down in Pensacola, the T-28s were being flown out of Whiting Field. It was the basic airplane trainer before guys started to fly helicopters. And it was always fun to hear these things because they just rumbled. They just rumble along. Here with this airplane, you can see on the side, you can see a triangle right ahead of the numbers, and that's where the Mexican Air Force logo is going to go on this airplane.
And that's the original Mexican paint job. That's the remnants of it. You can see the 28 there behind the triangle. This aircraft was number 928, so they had 28 on the side, and that's the remnants of the original paint job.
So I know it doesn't look, it looks like it needs a little help right now. All the parts are here. We could always use some help in terms of putting these things back together. But these airplanes had extensive combat histories, not necessarily with the U.S. government, but they flew for the Vietnamese Air Force. They flew for the Laos. The CIA and the Ravens flew them. The French flew them in North Africa. But the C models also allowed for hard points on the wings for external stores like guns and bombs and that type of thing. Extensively used for marine patrol and for close air support. Very effective airplane.
You're correct. The D model had the strengthened wings and carried quite a bit of armament. I think there was an early type ejection seat installed in those too. It was more of a rocket, basically a rocket that just dragged you out. I forget the name of it, but it's a very unique kind of ejection seat.
We're going to walk around to the other side where we can show you the flaps. Huge flaps on this airplane. And as you can see right here, I'm not certain you can see it right down here in the bottom, but they have places where you go ahead and you climb up on the flaps. Oh, that's okay. We can see it. If you want to point to those the places that are the footholds, or the foot compartments. Right there, down there, and another one up there. So that essentially helped you get up into the cockpit because, as you can see, this is a tall airplane, big tall airplane, and when you sat in it, you sat very high in the airplane also, so you sat way up. This again, since it was kind of a World War II design, when students took them to the boat, they would sometimes fly them out to the boat with the canopy open. So let's see, what's the speed range on these things, David?
It was a little over 300 miles an hour max for the A model like this one. With the larger engine, I believe it was about 330 miles an hour max. Okay.
And again, the C models were made to go to carriers, so they beefed up the landing gear. They put a tail hook on the airplane.
Yes, the rear fuselage would be kind of notched, and you'd see a very prominent tail hook there. And the rudder was redesigned to compensate for that too.
And I think they also, if I remember right, you can tell the difference with the props because the props have got a blunt end on them with the C models. I think I read something about that. So again, the airplanes were used not only by the Mexican Air Force, who we're going to represent here, so we can keep that heritage of Mexican Squadron 201 alive here in North Texas, but it was also used by the CIA and the Laotians and the Air Force Ravens. So we're talking about potentially doing a what we refer to it here as a Harlequin paint job, where one side will be the Mexican Air Force, and the other side will be a Raven or Laotian. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm having trouble with the bright sun out here reading the screen. So if you're asking questions, I may have to answer them later. Yeah, putting a shade over it's not helping a lot. So
too bright.
Was this airplane hydraulically boosted on the controls, or was this all manual?
I believe it was all manual.
Okay. I think it was too. I don't really know that much about it. But here's some of the other things that we've seen before. Is you've got a trim tab on the aileron, and so that's just so you can trim the pressure out. My understanding is that you're constantly trimming this airplane, constantly trimming it. And here's something that we haven't talked about before. I've got a couple F-18s going overhead. These are static wicks, and you'll see those on airplanes a lot. You'll even see them on modern airliners. In fact,
it's missing the latter half though. Here.
Yeah, missing a little half, but it sticks out here, and it's so static charge wicks off the airplane, so that you don't have any problem with static electricity building up on the airplane, because static electricity does build up. Now, one of the things we're not seeing on this wing that we saw in other ones is we're not seeing any vortex generators at all. So they weren't concerned about how the laminar flow was going to come across the wing. But as you can see, this is a giant flap, and it really allowed the airplane to get slow for going into the carrier. See if we can get around here where you can see the landing gear a little bit. I think maybe we'll just duck under the wing. Oops. Gimbal's not working as fast as I'm moving here. Okay, it's a pretty stout landing gear. I always remember when we were watching them land around Kingsville or Pensacola or on the boat, that the airplane always shuddered a little bit when it landed, so it was a stiff gear. I also remember that some of my friends who used to fly them, they told them when they started flying them that they were told if they lost an engine and they were going to go into the trees, to not worry about trying to avoid the trees, because they had the best battering ram in the world right in front of them.
Pretty much.
So.
Now I know the main gear is very sturdy. The nose gear they did have issues with. I know there's a dampener on there, and if you lose that dampener, you're probably going to lose your nose wheel. It's a heck of a lot of vibration. The B-25 Mitchell, I know, had the same. Another North American project.
And the dampener is right up in here.
Another unique feature of the A model is nose wheel steering. The latter models did not have it, but on this particular model, there's nose wheel steering.
Okay, let me see. Maybe I can see some of the things here. Let's see.
You mentioned the unique noise, the really short exhaust stubs right here that aren't present right now, but will be after the restoration. That's what gave it its unique sound.
Oh, really? Okay.
The really short exhaust system.
Let's see. What was the max speed of the A model?
About 300 miles an hour.
About 300.
It was only 900 horsepower engine, R1300. Oops, barrier there. And,
yeah.
So about 300 miles an hour. Add about 450 more horsepower, you can get up to 330.
And here's our ever-present pitot tube, right here out on the tip of the wing, out in front of the air, so it's going through undisturbed air. So let's do a little bit walking back around.
And you did hit the nail on the head earlier about it being a mix of World War II technology and early jet technology, and that's exactly the way they designed it, was to be a good transitional trainer.
Okay, and here is static port. We've talked about these a lot, but here's the static port. So you're taking the measurement of the no airflow or negative airflow here at this point, and the ram air coming through the pitot tube, and you'll be able to determine how fast you're going and what altitude you're at. Now, let's see, speed brakes on this airplane? I believe so.
Not on the A models.
Not on the A's, okay.
I think they're definitely present on the C's. I think some of the B's, the Navy B's, had speed brakes, but the A does not have it.
So again, and Squadron 201 was not only in Cancun, but also in Cozumel. Cozumel's the island just off of Cancun. So
now that vertical right there, it still has some original Mexican Air Force paint. This is Squadron 203. This aircraft, when it was retired from Squadron 201, it ended up at Squadron 203, and then it completely ended its retirement there and was surplused in the 1980s, and it and two of its sisters came to Texas. So this was part of batch of 3 that came here.
That looks like a winged shark. It's kind of cool.
It is a winged shark. I believe that is hand painted on there.
Okay, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to let people know about this?
Not really. I think we've touched on everything. We've touched on the Laos history, which I did wanted to mention, the incredible history there. The Laotian, the Hmong people actually flying these in combat in their own country, and CIA trained, and basically the Ravens would come in and borrow T-28s from time to time. They had where the Laotian national insignia would be a bracket, and they could put a placard there and basically just blank that out. They would borrow the airplane and use it and bring it back because they were based at the same base, and Laotians would continue to operate it.
As you can see, we've got a lot of work to do on this airplane, and at least it's gotten in line to do that, and we're glad that David is trusting us to do the right thing here. Maybe you can explain this compressed gas engine on this one.
We do have an engine for this airplane. It's going to be upgraded to basically the D standard, which is we mentioned the Laotian Air Force. They took A's, rebuilt them, took the R1300 off, put on the R1820, and strengthened the wings, etc. So that's pretty much what's going to happen to this one. It's going to get the big engine and the 3-bladed prop, and it's still going to be painted, like you said, as Mexican Air Force, but it allows us an opportunity, since it's going to be in that configuration, to possibly do a Raven tribute.
Well, and the cylinder on there is to give some weight onto the nose gear, so it doesn't.
There's no weight on the front, and being a nose wheel aircraft, it wants to sit on its tail if it doesn't have an engine present.
We're going to get out here. We can back off, and you can kind of see the whole airplane.
But yeah, hopefully soon we can get the cowling work finished and get the engine mounted, and we can get that gas bottle off of there.
So I apologize for not being able to answer questions today. I just can't see the screen in the bright sun. But this has been our walk around for today. I appreciate having David with us to be able to help talk about the airplane. He knows far more about these than I do. And one last thing is that these airplanes were originally designed to replace the AT-6 Texan, which they did, and I believe they built about 1,000 of these, or was it close to 2,000 of them, I think it was?
It was over 1,000, I believe. I don't know the exact number, but they were actually in service side by side. It was made to replace the T-6 Texan, but at that point they were rebuilding T-6s into T-6Gs, and it served, both made by North American, so you had two North American trainers still serving the Air Force and eventually the Navy side by side at the same time.
Well, and these flew here in Texas up into the 1980s, especially down in Corpus Christi, because that was a transport base, and so they flew down there a lot. They flew in Florida at Whiting Field, but here in Texas they flew until the 1980s, when they were replaced by the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentors, which had been used for a long time as a basic trainer. So. Well, from the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, home to the most touchable warbirds in Texas, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. We will be on again Wednesday. Not sure what we're going to do Wednesday. I think we may be doing the T-37 Wednesday. That's about the last of the airplanes here, although we've got an 01 Bird Dog. So we'll see what we're going to do here on Wednesday. Weather will be dependent on some of that. But we are open. We are open today from 9 until 1. We're going to be open tomorrow from 11 until 3. So we are open on weekends. And we ask that, if possible, that you pre-buy your tickets. You can do that online through the website and our online store. But we're here. Oh, and one more thing. We'll just kind of spin around here. I know some of you are aware of this, but Bob returned his big red fire truck today. It came back from the paint barn. Bob Adams and the B-36 guys have been working on this for a long time now. I think it's been about 3 years or so. And so today it came back from the paint barn, just looking bright and almost brand new, and ready for Wes Cloud to do some of his magic with putting markings on it. So come on out and visit, and in the meantime, be safe, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks, folks.